Thank you all for having me here today. As Janet said, I'm Jeremy Clark, and I'm 15 years old. And I know, if you read the news or if you turn on the television, we're always surrounded by these dire statistics and dire facts about climate change and about the devastating impacts that it will have and already is having on our earth. And these can be really tough to hear, and sometimes they can be kind of counterintuitive. They can drag us down and make us feel like there's no hope. But when I feel like there's no hope, I draw inspiration from the past, specifically from the civil rights movement. And I think about all the things that the people in that movement were facing. They were facing a brutal and racially biased police force. They were facing deep roots of racism and hatred. And they were facing socioeconomic oppression, which makes it really hard to start a movement, and a successful one at that. But the civil rights movement was enormously successful. And we still see the effects of its success today. So if they could do it under those odds way out of their favor, there's nothing that we can't do. And in fact, we have a moral obligation to fight for the climate. And you might say, well, the past isn't analogous to the present, right? Climate change is a time-sensitive issue. We only have 12 years to cut our emissions drastically. And I would say, well, think about all the things, the big things, that we've done fast. We built Apollo 11 in 8 years. We built the Transcontinental Railroad in 6 years, and we built the Hoover Dam and Burj Khalifa, the tallest skyscraper in the world, in just 5 years. And that proves that humans are really good at doing things, big things, fast. So we have the capability to mitigate climate change, and we have the time to mitigate climate change. It's just if we're willing to do it, and it's just if people like you are willing to do it. But you might ask, well, why act? Wouldn't it be easier to just sit back and do nothing? And the answer is yes, it would be easier to sit back and do nothing. But along with a moral obligation to mitigate climate change, we also have a religious obligation. The Psalm of David says, "The earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof, and the world and those who dwell therein." And he's saying, the world isn't just ours. The world is God's. The world is the animals and plants that live in it. And we can't just take ownership of the world because it's for everyone. And even without that religious obligation, we have a moral obligation, right? It's just the right thing to do, to preserve the future, preserve the planet for future generations, to make sure that every generation has a world that is worth living in. So I will conclude my speech with some simple remarks. The service of this church only begins once this service has ended. Thank you.